reason why I chose this topic is that in 4th grade, during Christmas vacation, I went to San Francisco. I wanted to tell you guys how fun it is, and then you might want to go there. How to get there. First, go to Narita or Haneda Airport and get a flight to San Francisco. It'll take about 8 to 10 hours from Japan to get to San Francisco. San Francisco is the 4th largest city in California, with a population of 744,000 people. 50% of them are white, 30% of them are Asians with mostly Philippines and Chinese, and 20% of them are African Americans or Hispanics. History. In 1848, a person named James Wilson Marshall discovered gold while he was constructing a sawmill. In 1849, the news spread and a lot of people came with wagons, carts, and ships and other things to carry their gold in. So instead of mining gold, some people built businesses and sold useful things for the miners. The gold rush changed California a lot. Before the gold rush, there were only about 15,000 people. After the gold rush, there were about 75,000 people gained. Between the 1850s and the 1860s, San Francisco gained more than 280,000 people. And those people were people all over the world. Earthquakes. In 1906, an earthquake occurred like we had in Japan. In San Francisco, it occurred at 5:12 p.m. Only 700 people died. In San Francisco, some houses burned over 3 days. 300,000 people lost their homes. After the earthquake, safety laws were passed to lower the number of dead people. Then in 1989, another earthquake occurred, but only 67 people died because of the safety laws that were passed. But part of the Bay Bridge broke. Alcatraz. In 1755, Native Americans found the land of Alcatraz. A common name for Alcatraz is the Rock. In the 1850s, armies built forts. In 1854, they built a lighthouse, but the lighthouse was rebuilt in 1909 because of the earthquake that occurred in 1906. In 1907, it became a military prison, but between the 1920s and the 1930s, people thought that this was a good place for bad people and for crimes. So in 1937, it became a federal prison. Some of these people were Al Capone, Birdman Robert Stroud, and Alvin Karpis. When Alcatraz closed 6 years later, the Native Americans set up Alcatraz again and moved there. They lived there for 18 months. They left, but most of the buildings were damaged. Those damaged buildings still remain now. Fun stuff. Lombard Street. Lombard Street was first a slope of 27 degrees. It was too dangerous, so between 1922 and 1923, Lombard Street was transformed into a street with 8 sharp turns, and then then the street became a slope of 32 degrees. People say it's the crookedest street in the world, but actually it isn't. There are more steep and crooked streets in the world. The steepest is Filbert Street with a slope of 31.5 degrees. And the crookedest is Snake Alley. It has more sharp turns. Alamo Square. Alamo Square is a park with 6 houses in a row lining up across the Alamo Hill. The 6 houses are the same type of house with different colors. It was designed by the mayor in 1856, James Van Ness. People also called it the Painted Ladies or the Six Sisters. First, there were so many types of those houses, but it was destroyed because of the earthquake that occurred in 1906. Cable cars. If you ever visited San Francisco, you will see a lot of steep hills. Cable cars were invented in 1869 when a person named Andrew Smith, owner of a wire rope factory, saw a horse-drawn going backward, which caused the death of 5 horses. Because of this, Andrew Smith built the first cable car in 1869, but it took until 1873 before the first one opened. The cable cars were used everywhere until the electric steer cars were invented. Cable cars were not used as much after the earthquake of 1906. Most of them were replaced by buses, trains, and electric steer cars. Even in 1947, the mayor tried stopping it. Between 1982 and 1984, the cable cars came back. There are 3 main lines, the Powell Mason, the Powell Hyde, and the California Street lines. Towns. Chinatown was made in the mid-19th centuries. Asians started to live there, especially Chinese people. Too many Chinese people came, so the U.S. government passed out a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which lowered the number of Chinese people. In the 1920s, they started building triangular prism-like roofs, and after the World War II, Chinese started moving back to San Francisco, and it became like it was before the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed. The Chinatown may have more visitors than the Golden Gate Bridge. In the Japantown. In the 1860s, a lot of Japanese people started moving into San Francisco. The earthquake, most of them lived in Chinatown, but the earthquake damaged or destroyed a little bit. So the Japanese people started moving to the western addition. They built Japanese stores, Japanese-like temples, and also Japanese restaurants. During the World War II, not many people were there, but after the World War II, a lot of them came back. Sports. The 49ers is a football team. They got their name from the miners who arrived in 1849 for the gold rush. In 1949, they started their team in the American Football Conference. 49ers were the second best team until they joined the NFL. They did not do good in the first few years. San Francisco Giants. They started their team in 1958. They actually started their team in 1883, and they were called the New York Giants, but they moved to San Francisco in 1958, so they changed their name. They played in the World Series 19 times, and they won 22 National League games. Golden Gate Bridge. The engineer of Golden Gate Bridge is Joseph Strauss. In 1933, they started building it, and in 1937, they finished building it. This bridge cost $35 million. It took $35 million to build it. The length of the whole bridge is 8,981 feet, or 2,737 meters. There are two towers. These are the 2 towers. And the length between those towers is 1,280 meters long. The two towers are called the Art Deco towers. They are both 820 feet or 250 meters tall. The Golden Gate Bridge has 6 rows to drive in. Each row is 90 feet or 27 meters. It is 220 feet or 67 meters above sea level. And the cables, these string things, those are the cables, and they have a diameter of 90 centimeters. Bay Bridge. The engineer of Bay Bridge is Charles Henry Purcell. They started building this bridge in 1933. They completed in 1936. It was 7.18 kilometers or 4.46 miles. This bridge took $77,600,000 to build. The bridge had 2 decks like a bunk bed. Long time when it was built, the bottom one was used for trains, and the top was used for transportation like buses and cars. But there were too many transportations, so they decided to turn both of them in for transportation. And both decks have a width of 17.5 meters. They have 5 rows. The eastern span tower is 525 feet or 160 meters. The western span tower is 590 feet or 158 meters. The eastern span was damaged because of the 1989 earthquake. They started rebuilding it in 2002. And this is the part that broke in the earthquake. While building, a contest was held for the best bridge. They already thought of one called the SAS, self-anchored suspension. They decided to put it on the Bay Bridge that was broken. They started building the SAS in 2006, and they think they're going to finish in 2013. Coit Tower. The Coit Tower is built with money from Lily Hitchcock Coit. She wanted the people to build this for a fireman who saved her from the earthquake. This represents a fire hose, and it is 64 meters or 210 feet tall. It seems high because it is located on top of a telegraph hill. Inside, there are a lot of artworks and a 360-degree view of San Francisco. Transamerica Pyramid. The architect of Transamerica Pyramid is William Pereira. He said the meaning of skyscraper is that it has to be a pyramid shape. It opened in 1972 and the height was 260 meters or 853 feet. It had 48 floors and a high spire and a 64-meter high spire on top of the whole thing. And the high spire is the height of the Coit Tower. Biblical perspective. In Romans 12:6-8, it tells that each of us has different imaginations depending on what grace God has given to us. I'm happy that God gave these grace to these people who built these things, or else I won't be choosing this for my ISP topic. And thank you.